I'm calling the Legislation and Policy Development Committee meeting to order. First on the agenda is the approval of minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any changes, corrections? Great. And our next, we will move on to John.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. So we are in the process of updating what we have always referred to as the Healthy and Balanced Living Curriculum Framework. Some of you may recall this. That was developed in 2006. Actually, I was at the Department of Public Health at the time. I served on the committee when it was developed. It's coming full circle. Can everybody hear me okay?
Can you folks hear online?
All right, I'll speak up.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we are in the process of updating this curriculum framework. There was actually some legislation passed a year or so ago that wanted to add some additional components. So that was reason enough for us to take a holistic look at the curriculum framework. So that's what we're in the process to do. And I'll just say that we are finalizing it in the next couple of weeks, and we will be sharing this with this committee in the next week or so, couple of weeks, so that you can actually look at the content of it for our next meeting. And so that will be the opportunity to approve it, and then we can move it on to the board, the full board, for review and approval in June. At least that's the plan. And so I would just say, overall, the major difference between the 2006 framework and the new framework is really a much more emphasis on the role of health education and physical education, and the importance of that work with regard to social emotional learning and social emotional well-being of students. So it's not simply about physical skills, but that's still included in there. It's not simply about understanding health education concepts, but how the students' understanding of health education concepts and physical education skills help them work toward being more emotionally supported in their own life and throughout life, not just learning those in school. So with regard to health and safety, the graduation requirements were changed a couple of years ago, so that students now require 1 credit in health and safety and 1 credit in what we're referring to as physical education and wellness. So the health and safety is explicitly mapped out in statute under section 10-16B, and it includes everything from human growth and development to nutrition. It includes CPR now. It includes self-examinations for breast cancer. Includes community and consumer health, physical, mental, and emotional health, youth suicide, all kinds of things, and also safety with regard to accident prevention, gang membership. So there's a full boat of health and safety. And over the last year or so, we've spent a lot of time working with health educators and physical education teachers about what the difference is between health education, health and safety, and physical education and wellness. So it's a little mixed, and so that's why we think that the curriculum framework, as it's forming, really crosses all of those things. So we talk about in this work, we talk about educating the whole child, and you may be familiar with something called the whole school, whole child, whole community model, referred to as the WISC model, which really incorporates all of those things that I just sort of described. It includes focusing on the child's cognitive, physical, social, emotional development through the alignment, integration, and collaboration between education and health. And so we focus on that, and through the provision of education and standards for health education, physical education, folks So specifically, the framework includes the physical education and health education, and is aligned with the most recent national health education and physical education standards. We work with a number of stakeholders in education and in health and fitness, not mostly the Connecticut Association of Physical Education and Health Education Educators. So those folks who are working mostly at Southern Connecticut State University and Central Connecticut State University, training health education teachers and training physical education teachers, and also probably the organization with the one of the longest acronyms ever is the Connecticut Association of Physical Education, Health Education, Recreation, and Dance. A number of folks in that commonly referred to as APERB. They were a big assistance in this, since we don't actually have a PE or health education consultant on staff any longer. So when we talk about quality health education and physical education programs, we talk about providing students with information and learning experiences to support and enhance their abilities to access, understand, appraise, apply, and advocate for health information. The ability to move with confidence and confidence in a wide variety of physical activities in multiple environments. Learning experiences that lead to academic achievement. Skills that focus attention, improve concentration, on-task behavior. And again, as I mentioned, encourage lifetime healthy behaviors and goal setting, not just exercise for kids, but understanding that health, good health and physical activity is a lifelong learning experience. And you know, athletics and physical activity helps foster cross-cultural communication, problem solving, negotiation, and conflict resolution skills. And so the standards really reflect four major components. As I mentioned, the national health education standards this was modeled after, largely dependent on that. It was adopted a couple of years ago nationally. It focuses on obviously essential core content and developmentally appropriate understanding of concepts. Grade level performance indicators. So what should students learn at certain grade levels? What concepts should they understand? And again, the big sort of update and focus is connecting with the social emotional learning competency. So specifically, there are 5 or 6 areas that are included in the curriculum framework that align directly with social emotional learning alignment. So the social emotional learning concept of self-awareness is included in the National Health Education Standards advocacy component, which is analyzing influences, accessing valid information. The concept of self-management has its own section in our standards around self-management, goal setting, understanding concepts. The social emotional learning component of social awareness talks about advocacy, talks about communication, talks about analyzing influences to differentiate between good science and bad science, and to understand this concept. So SEL focuses on relationship skills, so there's a specific component in here on communication with peers, with adults, and understanding communication strategies. And then responsible decisions, looking at, again, analyzing influences and advocacy. So very specifically, the core concepts include many of the areas that would seem to be obvious, right? So alcohol, nicotine, the number one is alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs, competencies around that. Healthy relationships, violence prevention, healthy eating and physical activity, sexual health, optimal wellness and disease prevention, sexual assault and abuse prevention, mental and emotional health, and safety and injury prevention. And so these are intertwined. And just to give you a sort of a sample of what the competencies look like in different grade levels, this focus on alcohol, nicotine, and other drugs For pre-K to grade 2, the indicators are this is just as an example, identify dangerous household products that are harmful if intentionally swallowed, inhaled, or absorbed. In grades 3 to 5, it expands to include explain why household products are harmful if intentionally inhaled or absorbed. Grades 6 through 8 is identify healthy coping mechanisms and alternatives to substance use. And then in grades 9 to 12, it talks about differentiating between proper use and abuse of over-the-counter and prescription medicines. It talks about larger concepts related to alcohol use and substance use prevention. From just understanding what alcohol is at the pre-K and grade 3 to 5 level, to really looking as a high schooler around examining resiliency skills that empower people to remain alcohol independent. So with each of these 4 content areas, there are the grade bands are pre-K to 2, grade 3 to 5, grade 6 to 8, and 9 to 12. And that's an expansion of what we had before in the old healthy and balanced living framework that really had elementary, middle, and high. And so the national standards have expanded that to have more differentiation by grade band and more specificity around those concepts. And then the physical education component, and again, there's separate components in the curriculum framework, reflects the 5 national standards, and those are things like, they use a term called physically literate, which I'm not really a huge fan of, but it's a concept that means, do you understand what we're talking about? Standard 1 is motor skill and movement patterns. Standard 2 is applies knowledge of concepts, principles, strategies, and tactics related to movement and performance. Standard 3 is demonstrates knowledge and skills to maintain a healthy, enhancing level of physical health and fitness. Standard 4 is responsible personal and social behavior that respects others. And Standard 5 is recognize the value of physical activity for health, enjoyment, challenge, self-expression, and our social interaction. So again, Standard 5 connects the understanding of physical activity and wellness and lifelong learning around physical activity to one's social emotional well-being. Not just, when we talk about both health education and physical education, many of you know that I also coordinate the child nutrition program in the department. And one of the things I always say is we're not doing nutrition education for nutrition education's sake, right? We talk about nutrition and talk about nutrition education as it adds value to someone's life and as it helps them be prepared to be good students and succeed academically. So all of those things, looking at the entire whole child model, is an understanding that these things are interrelated. They can't exist in a vacuum. So with regard to, I'll just give you an example of some of the competencies learned. So for physical education, to demonstrate that is by the end of grade 8, the learner will demonstrate fundamental movement skills, apply strategies to modify gameplay. So that talks about specific skills, and there are very specific skills in here that you will recognize from when we were in school, things like dribbling, passing basketball, and shooting, and archery, and all kinds of things. But then it expands to talk about design and implement a health-enhancing fitness program, participate in self-selected physical activity, and then the social aspect.
Years, our department sponsored by
Excuse me, could everyone please check that they're muted?
dollars per year for subscription fee.
Matt, may I? Go ahead, sir.
All right, so just lastly, even in physical education, physical activity, you relate it back to social emotional well-being, and that is accept individual differences and demonstrating inclusive behaviors, cooperate with and encourage classmates, and engage in physical activity for enjoyment and self-expression. So it incorporates sort of all of those concepts around your own self-awareness, your own self-regulation around the understanding of physical activity. It acknowledges the differences in students' differentiation with regard to skill level some of that is, really has been demonstrated in a number of schools, which have the unified sport, unified basketball, PE, when we talk about differently able, kids interacting and playing with other kids, really has just sort of elevated that understanding. So, I'll stop there. And again, we'll have more opportunity, you'll have an opportunity to review this once sort of final, get your feedback next month. But with that, I'll stop there.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the committee. Any questions? I'm gonna look up on the screen first, just to see if anyone's motioning. Don?
A lot of information, but I don't have anything in front of me. But, you know, and I'm a former physical educator, has not been in the classroom in a long time. So it kind of piqued my interest. We must have been talking about that. But next month we'll get something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Along the lines of what Don was saying, the PE, these are two separate entities. I remember that change. It used to be, I can remember when I first started teaching, PE teachers, and maybe Don would also teach health. But now they have to have a health certified person, correct? And a PE teacher does not mean that they're certified in health.
Right. Not anymore.
Not anymore, but it was that way. And so now they are two separate.
Separately, sir. When I came out of college in '67 with a physical education degree, I was automatically certified in health.
Right.
And then 20 years later, I think it changed. So,
I remember that big changeover. Everything was infused. Health was infused in science, and I remember that happening. The other question I had too is the grade bands that you were talking about. I know the mandate that changed in high school, that 1 credit for health, 1 credit for PE is definitely the graduation requirement. A lot of those grade bands go way back, like all the way to pre-K. Are those mandatory or are they suggested? Like, I'm wondering how many districts actually teach those health bands and who teaches it, because they don't have health teachers.
Yeah.
A lot of times they don't even have them in middle school. Sometimes if they're dual people there, they can do both, but certainly I don't know any district that has an elementary.
it's almost always that teacher
Yeah.
who has become cross certified. And, I mean, I know in my district, we have taught units of health, but it's been done by the PE teacher. So,
Yeah. I mean, it was infused in science, so there really isn't any definite, like, this must be part of instruction.
Well, not,
Or,
the specific standards that are in here are not required. Right? So these are curriculum standards that then districts can create curriculum or identify curriculum that address these. But to your point, there are a couple of pieces of legislation that are required. Things like HIV prevention, information about AIDS, substance use prevention, I think including opioid use behaviors are required every year for every student under one statute. And then the health and safety standards under 10-16B don't just apply to graduation of high school. Our understanding is that they apply to everyone.
okay.
But it doesn't say specifically in the statute, shall be taught to every student every year. It says these are the components of the prescribed courses.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of districts still infuse where they can. I know when the changing of the drug education, DARE was used by many districts, was brought in the DARE, police officers to teach that piece and that type of thing. So I was just wondering how that, I mean, it's always been an argument by many people that for a long time, the first time a child officially got a class in health was in 9th grade. They felt that was just way too late in their life to, especially when they started looking at teenage pregnancies happening a lot of times before that child was in 9th grade. And so perhaps if education started a little earlier, it would be, we wouldn't have such numbers of teenage pregnancies.
And a lot of these can be taught all of the standards, actually, most.
In a science class.
In
Science
class,
was
you know,
used
a
quite a
number
bit,
of,
yeah.
places to cover that. And that, to your point, that's sort of been the challenge, since the graduation standards changed. The folks are like, okay, so we have health and safety in this one credit in that, which is easily defined in the private course, right? But physical education and wellness is the other component. So we're still really trying to make sure that schools focus on the physical education part of it with a sort of a wellness bent, rather than saying, hey, that means we don't have to do PE anymore, we don't have to do activity or skills development. We can just have a didactic program. And that's not really, I don't think that's really intent.
Right.
Of that.
Yeah, I remember a lot of schools at one time, maybe 10, 15 years ago, saying if a child played a varsity sport, that should give them their PE credit. And that was a
Yeah,
big
that's
to
right.
do, because then everyone thought, oh my God, these kids are never gonna play,
Well,
they're never gonna do anything, So,
Yeah, that's an excellent example. And that comes up from time to time, almost every year.
Yeah.
That comes up. And, one could argue that in some sports, that might make sense. But it's also, it doesn't give credence to the understanding of lifelong physical activity and differentiation of skills. The example that I always use is if you got a 300-pound offensive guard on the football team, what coaches are talking to him about with regard to nutrition and lifelong physical education, physical activity is not the same as it would be in the PE, understanding what that is. And a lot of the athletics include more sort of more sedentary or less active activities, like golf, nothing against golf, but it can be less active, certainly in cross country, cross country team, or competitive fencing or competitive archery.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
they're all things we don't think that we would think.
Well, thank you, John. Any questions at all from anyone before we move on? Wait another minute, yeah, okay. Karen, did you have a question?
No, sorry, I was switching devices and I think it,
Oh, okay. We just,
I can hear better now. Thank you.
okay.
This is Bonnie. I just want to say that I think I really appreciate the social emotional piece that you're looking at, and really appreciate looking at the health and how lifelong learning regarding health starts early. So thanks for looking at that.
There's a lot of flexibility in how it gets delivered. How do you know it gets delivered? Or is that not the role of?
Good question.
Good
Yeah.
question,
Good question.
I mean, it's not necessarily a role you go in and inspect everything, but I mean, how do you know that it happens?
I think from our level, you don't really. There are a number of ways in which we can use as a barometer. I mean, our talent office looks at where health education teachers are. Schools that have health education teachers certified and schools that have PE teachers that are certified. That's one way of determining if they're even moving in that direction, right? The graduation requirements are hard and fast. Even though it's only one credit in each, that has to happen in grades 9 through 12. And there is a lot of advocacy out there. The instructors at Southern and Central in particular who produce a lot of these teachers are in those two organizations that I mentioned are real advocates in making sure that this becomes and continues to be important and relevant and included in the instruction. And the other piece about PE is for some it's one of those parts of the school day that some kids look forward to, right? And so it's like they need a lunch break, they need a snack break, they need a PE that's how sometimes that fits into the lower grade.
We used to, on the, I'm sorry, like, 95 Bethany this morning. I'll be clear sailing, so. Like on the sex education lesson, is that included in these standards?
There are, sexual health education are included as one of the standards, but we also produced in, 2016, the sexual health education standards that are as standalone.
Okay.
And it goes through a number of components in that.
So you said that, the teen pregnancies have no.
I'm waiting for, to end up putting another year on the high school and, or adding another 2 hours to the school day. We keep adding credit, and it's all good stuff.
Yeah, it is, but in some cases it restricts certain kids too badly, and there's no way around. Yeah, it's tough because it does restrict them. The nicer thing is that a lot of these middle schools now getting high school credit before, just like, you get college credit in high school, now you can get middle, high school credit, will help some of those kids so they can, explore different things. If not, they're sort of pigeonholed in, having to get all what they need now to come out of high school. They don't do some kind of extra. It's hard to compare to them, and it is all important.
The pandemic, so you hear, these news reports saying that compared to the United States compared to other countries, we have fewer days and fewer hours.
Most definitely. Yeah. Well, thanks, John. I look forward to next month. You said we'll see that report and then it goes to the full board. Now, Laura, for your exciting dull month.
Yeah, I know. So good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. I hope everyone can hear me. That's usually not a problem for me. So this was a long session, as we know, and we're 3 months in. We have 2 months left, and originally it was supposed to be a quiet session, and I have been tracking just about 300 bills in 19 different committees. So long ago, there were days that education bills were only raised in the education committee, and now we have education bills in environment. We have them in veterans affairs. We have them in the children's committee. There's 26 committees, and we had 19 of them with education bills. So most of them at this point in time have come up against their JF deadline or their joint favorable deadline, which is the time by which they have to vote bills out or they die in committee, in essence. Nothing's ever really dead until the end of session. It can always come back as an amendment, but I went from 300 bills down to 39. So with only 2 pending committees right now, that will have bills for us. And that's the Appropriations Committee, whose deadline is April 23rd, and the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, whose deadline is April 22nd. And so as soon as those committees have performed they're done all of their voting and met that deadline, I will get all of you a finished copy of the document that has a list with links to all of the bills that I'm still tracking, just so you're aware of what is alive and what is not alive. Our agency bill made it out of the Education Committee and was sent to the floor, which is great. So it doesn't have a fiscal note, so it wasn't caught up in appropriations, and so it made it out as it was submitted with all of the board priorities that were voted on by the board. So that happened. Currently, we are in the fiscal note stage of the program. So as bills are going to the Office of Fiscal Analysis, they reach out to me most of the time, which is nice, to see whether or not there's going to be a cost for the department. So we always flag that, and I tell all of the people here, just be super honest. If we cannot do this within available resources, we need to flag that. We need to let them know. We have to ask for bodies. If we think this is going to be an unfunded mandate on a district or is going to come at a cost to a district, let's flag that. Let's let them know. So that's what we're doing, at this point in time right now. There are still, also 4 board nominations that are pending, as those who are pending are aware. We still have Karen, Bonnie, Malia, and Eric, and they are sitting on the House calendar. They're at the top of the House calendar. They're double starred, so they're ready for action. So I imagine the next time that the House comes in, they very likely could take those up. I don't think there's anything holding them up. I just think they haven't had an opportunity to take them up yet. Session this year ends on June 9th. So as we said, I have two months almost to the day. We will be done. So June 9th is the last day of session. As we get closer to that date, the House and the Senate will obviously be convening more regularly, and I will definitely keep you all apprised, as I have been doing all session long, of the activities that are happening over at the Capitol. And with that, I will take any questions that folks have. My presentation wasn't as long as John's, but.
I'll open up to questions. Bob, we'll start with Bob.
Any concerns?
I mean, right now, yes, there are fiscal concerns. There are bills that are pending that.
General concerns.
Yeah, I mean, well, the fiscal concerns are concerns. So, I mean, there are some bills that, are pending that there's no way we could do them within available appropriations. There are other bills, that are pending in, the ones that are coming to mind, and Jessica has been intimately involved, and so she knows, are in the Children's Committee and the Education Committee. There are conflicting bills, especially with respect to virtual or distance learning. And we're trying to work our way through those right now and work with the governor's office to see if we can bring these 2 committees together, bring the chairs, the leaders of the 2 committees together. Senate Bill 2 is in the Children's Committee, and it is the large priority for education from the Senate. And so that is in conflict directly with Senate Bill 977, which is in the Education Committee. And so we are daily working through these things and trying to redline these proposals to, I mean, down to minutia, like the actual definition of virtual learning. And to me, I mean, it's defined 2 different ways in 2 different bills. And so there's kind of stuff like that. There's stuff we're super excited about. There's a right to read bill that was in the Education Committee that's being championed by now Senator Patricia Billy Miller from Stamford, formerly representative, which is going to hopefully, right now it creates a literacy center that is housed over at CERT. And our testimony that we submitted this year said, no, hold on. This is super important work and it needs to be done within the department. We want to own this work. And they seemed really excited that we wanted to take it on. And so that's another thing that we're working on right now, is to try and meet with them and go through the language to make it so that work is housed here. And they seem this year more than ever to be willing to provide us with the additional bodies that we need to carry out some of these larger projects. I mean, those are a couple of the ones that come to mind of big bills that are both concerning and exciting.
If I could just jump in, there seems to be a huge focus this legislative session on social emotional learning and students' mental health. And so that's, I think, what we're referring to as some of the conflicting language and bills that different committees have sort of chimed in and wanted to address, the Children's Committee, the Education Committee, the Public Health Committee, and things like that. So and that's in my area. So I think what we're trying to do is right size what that looks like. To be able to get at understanding and collecting information and providing services to students on behavioral health and mental health without further traumatizing them. In some cases, there's some initiatives that we were concerned that would further traumatize students in this data collection pieces. And so we're working on either alternate language or removing some of that, so that it doesn't do that, and so that it doesn't try to collect information in a number of different ways so that districts are not overburdened and students are not emotionally.
Yeah, and I think just to put a further point on this word conflict, I think just to be clear, what we're saying is it's not necessarily that the concept is in conflict. It's probably that they're trying to kind of say the same thing or get after the same end goal. And so what we're trying to do is use our expertise to ensure that the language lines up with what that end goal is, and also consistent with all of the work we've done, both in the social emotional learning sphere for a long time, but also in the past year in this sort of virtual remote learning arena in the context of COVID, and particular to, and understanding that social and emotional learning and support is perhaps even more important than ever because of the experience that we've had over the past year. And also in the context of the virtual and remote learning, I keep saying not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, we want to learn from the positives. We want to think about ways where virtual and remote access gives a benefit to students, whether it be working amongst communities and across districts, or access to AP courses, the kinds of things that this board has talked about for a long time, but also was trying to promote when we allowed a little more flexibility this year. So it's just, we're trying to help shape the language in these bills that's consistent with the vision that you've already sort of established in your resolution around allowing remote and virtual learning to occur, while also sort of moving forward and reimagining what education is going to look like next year and throughout the coming years.
Well, I'm happy to hear that they're in conversation with you both, because that's so important. We don't always see that. And I think I've listened in on some of these committee meetings, and it's, you know, I get it. They're promoting what they want for their, you know, their districts that they represent and so forth. But I don't think what's getting a real loud voice is that, you know, SEL is not new, and there are many districts that do it beautifully, and that has to be, they've got to know that, and I don't think they do at their districts, maybe not, and the complaints and so forth, and the fear of what's going on. So I'm glad that's going on, because it's, you hate to see them jump to some bill that is going to be so badly defined, perhaps, that gets us all in a mess, really, and gets the districts who are doing very, very well in that area in a bigger mess. You know, like really messes up their whole system. That might be excellent, you know, very well done at this point. So I'm glad there's that communication, because listening to some of them sometime, I'm like, God, I wish they could walk into a classroom like they're not speaking, like they don't, because they're not listening to what, you know, they don't know what they're just listening to the complaint, and they don't really know what's going on, and that's frustrating. My screen colleagues, Woody.
This is Woody. Jess, I think you said something about legislation related to board priorities. What is that about?
Yeah, what I was referring to was that you folks had passed the resolution some time ago now, I think it was last August. And in that resolution that you passed around remote and virtual learning, when you were allowing it to happen this year, there was a lot of conversation about the language that we wanted to use to ensure that principles of equity and support were sort of at the forefront. Grade level supports were at the forefront of the allowance for virtual learning to occur. And so what I was saying was that in our conversations with the legislative folks, that's one of the reference points that we have to ensure that we're communicating to them how was it that you shaped it this year, and how can what they shape going forward be informed by how you shaped it this year. So I can send you a copy of that again if you want to take a look at it, because it had some important language in there around what your vision was for the importance of providing, you know, a framework for remote and virtual access for students.
Okay, thank you. And also, if I could ask, that right to read, Bill, what is that about? Does that mean the right to read controversial books, or what is it?
Right, so I can definitely get you the bill number so you can take a look at it. And again, we're still in ongoing conversations to try and shape what the bill looks like. But Senator Miller and the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus have made literacy a huge priority of their group for the last, as long as I've been working for the department. And they were originally the ones who created our Melissa Hickey's position, the reading director position within the department. And so this is an idea that they've been batting around for the last several years to create a literacy center. And originally it was going to be housed at UConn, and then they were thinking about doing it at CERT. And I mean, I can get you the language so you can see all the details of exactly what they're trying to accomplish.
It had to do with, I just wondered if it had to do with banned books. It was the right to read. No.
It does not have to do with banned books.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Well, thanks, Laura.
Yes, you're welcome.
Adjourn. And we'll see you folks on the screen, on another screen shortly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. 15 minutes to go.
All right.